dark in this corner. It's Tuesday, the day after hitting level 40. I have spun 2 Pokestops today and caught a handful of Pokemon. I think a lot of people experience that after finally hitting 40. But I do have some packages to open up and something I actually really want to talk about. Actually, first just give me 1 second. Okay, much better. I think I lost my knife again. Trackers, scanners, feeds, they go by a lot of names in the community. But regardless of what people refer to them as, they have the same purpose: to help you find Pokemon. Now, while using them isn't strictly against terms of service, they run on things that are. Scanners essentially function by employing bot accounts. Pokemon Go accounts run by bots that essentially spoof around and report back to the scanner service what Pokemon they find and the IVs of those Pokemon. Hooking you up, Nick. I'll send a letter too, so be on the lookout. Oddish and Poliwag are my favorite. Cat. Thank you, Cat. In the early days of Pokemon Go, Niantic was aggressively shutting down scanners, trackers, maps, because they were putting serious strain on the Pokemon Go servers. Remember, this was at a time where traffic on the game blew by Niantic's wildest expectations by like 50 times or 500 times. It was a lot higher than they expected. So on top of like 500 million people downloading the game, putting strain on the servers, there were also probably equally as many bot accounts running all these map services. And that's part of the reason why Pokemon Go was crashing so much when it first came out. More recently, however, the Pokemon Go player base has fallen, and Niantic isn't aggressively shutting down maps like they used to. I think there's a reason for that. This book, by the way, was written and published by 7th grade student Sumeda Sethi. So, Sumeda, thank you for the book, for the magnets, and of course for the letter. Appreciate it. So, why isn't Niantic going after trackers the way they used to? In short, it's because they are actually helping the community. I know we've talked at length about this topic before. I've expressed many times my feelings about trackers, which has always been, personally, I don't use them. I would much rather wander about, find my Pokemon naturally. I feel like knowing exactly where they are and where to go and how good the IVs are going to be takes away a lot of the surprise. In the original main series games, you never knew exactly what Pokemon you were going to encounter. You never knew how good its IVs were going to be. And because I grew up playing the main series games, I wanted that experience to transfer into Pokemon Go. That's basically the main reason I don't use trackers. Joe, thank you for this Pokemon Go Fest t-shirt, and thank you for sharing the stories. Pokemon Go, bringing people together. Now, here's a bit of a controversial hot take. Trackers also bring people together. When I was in Singapore with Brandon Tan, when we showed up at the 100% slack off, the community was there. Like I said in those videos, it's very common for people to use feeds and trackers in Singapore. Not everyone, but a lot of people do. The hardcore players definitely do. So whenever you show up at 100 IV spawn, you're gonna run into people. It's like a community event. The same way that people show up to raid together, in some communities, people show up to catch 100 IV Pokemon together. Noel, thank you so much for the ditto and for the drawing. I'm gonna put it in a frame. Like right now, I'm gonna frame it. So for one thing, trackers are providing a tool to the community that does bring people together in a way. At the same time, they're also helping keep the game alive in some communities. Another story from Singapore. When Singapore's biggest map went down, the players there told me there was a very noticeable decrease in the amount of people out playing the game. And of course that's partially because some people have come to rely on the trackers, and if they can't use the trackers to find the Pokemon they want, then their game experience isn't the same. And while using maps isn't part of the game experience as Niantic intended it, I think they're aware of the fact that these tools are keeping some people interested in the game. Oh my god, this is heavy. So, If the original issue with trackers was that they were a strain on the servers, and that's not really a problem anymore, what is the problem? The problem is the unfair advantage that they provide to players who actually use them. Obviously, someone who follows a feed or uses a map is going to have a lot more perfect IV Pokemon than someone who doesn't. Oh my god. Noelle, I'm sorry. Someone who uses a map is going to have probably a lot more rare Pokemon than someone who doesn't. And while that might mean the player who uses maps can put a Blissey in every gym, and that Blissey might take 5 seconds longer to beat than someone who doesn't use maps and has a lower IV Blissey, it doesn't really provide a huge competitive advantage because there isn't a huge competitive aspect to Pokemon Go. Oh, this is only the first of 2 packages. There's gonna be more coming. I'm not sure if this says Abe or Jake, but either way, Saiyan 689, thank you so much. So when a real competitive aspect does come to Pokemon Go, something like, say, PvP, this is going to be a much bigger problem. How then does Niantic fix that problem? The answer, in my opinion, is by taking away the advantage that using a map provides. We already know that taking away the map itself will actually hurt the player base. So what we need to do is give the players who don't use maps a way to get what the players who do use maps have access to. And like I said earlier, that's 100 IV Pokemon and rare Pokemon. Now, obviously, Niantic isn't just going to introduce their own map. They're not going to tell you exactly where the 100 IV Pokemon are. They're not going to tell you where the rare Pokemon are. But there are definitely ways to design systems that could make up the competitive disadvantage that players have by not using maps. Oh wow, you had business cards made for me. I'll be honest, every time I've tried to give someone a business card, they just say, just follow me on Twitter, we'll talk there. Twitter's the new business card. Save a tree. I appreciate it though, don't get me wrong. So let's start with the first one. 100 IV Pokemon. How do you give everyone access to 100 IV Pokemon without using maps? Well, one potential way is to introduce a training system, a way to increase a Pokemon's IVs. Now, this isn't something that can be done in the main series games, but there is something similar. In the main series, there's IVs and there's EVs. Not EVs, but EVs, effort values. They're different than individual values in that they start at 0, but you can control what they become. Every time you battle a Pokemon, it'll award a certain number of EVs, and that affects how your Pokemon's stats increase as it levels up. So for example, if you battled a Pokemon that gave you points for attack, when your Pokemon levels up, its attack will get stronger. And as Pokemon Go is essentially a simplified version of Pokemon, they could definitely simplify the EV and IV system by combining them into one new system. So imagine you catch a Bulbasaur. It's level 35 in the wild, but its IVs are decent. Let's say 10, 10, 10, just like your starter. You don't want to use your Stardust, you don't want to use your candies because it's not perfect IVs. But if there was a system that allowed you to increase that Bulbasaur's IVs, you could train it up to 15, 15, 15. You could train it up to be a perfect Bulbasaur, and then you'd have a perfect Bulbasaur. Obviously, in the main series, this is done by battling certain Pokemon. It's also done with the use of vitamins, things like protein, carbos, zinc. These all increase specific stats, EVs. Those items could be introduced in Pokemon Go. They could drop from Pokestops at a really rare rate. They could be raid rewards. There's any number of ways that you can get them in the game, but they could potentially increase a Pokemon's IV, or combination IV-EV, by 1 point. Let's say I get a protein, I use the protein on my Bulbasaur, its attack goes up to 11. 4 more proteins, and the Bulbasaur has perfect 15 attack. That's the easy way, I think. The fun way, and probably the harder way, in terms of coding, is to incorporate a training system through battles similar to the other way that it's done in the main series games, by battling specific Pokemon. Or if that's too difficult, if that seems like it's too complex, you could just award like effort points for battling at all in gyms. And then you could use those effort points on the Pokemon that earned them to increase its IVs. Again, by battling with your Bulbasaur, or evolving it to a Venusaur and battling with your Venusaur, you could earn effort points, invest those effort points into increasing its IVs, and eventually have a perfect 15-15-15 Venusaur without using maps in a Canada Dry. And maple syrup, have you figured out that this package came from Canada? Maybe the Tim Hortons gave it away for those of you who are familiar. Ooh. That's actually really helpful. And to finish off that thought, by giving players a way to train their Pokemon up to 15-15-15 perfect IVs, you eliminate the advantage that players have by using scanners to find these perfect IV Pokemon. If anyone can train and get a perfect IV Pokemon, then everyone's on a more even playing field. Obviously, by using maps, it's going to be easier, but if everyone can get perfect IV Pokemon by putting in some effort, then no one has an advantage there. Oh man, there's more. Canadian money. How much is this worth? Saying $6.89. Thank you. Let me just quickly also interrupt myself here to talk about another form of maps. Gym maps. Gym maps for finding raids function the same way as other maps. They use bot accounts. Those accounts report back to the server on what raids are nearby. The type of hardcore raiding that I've showcased and even participated in here on the channel would not be possible without these gym maps, and personally, I do use them to find raids. Now, without these maps, people wouldn't be able to do 80 or 100 raids in one day, but if people weren't doing 80 or 100 raids, they also aren't spending 80 or 100 raid passes per day, so I don't think Niantic is terribly upset that these gym maps exist. And I'm not saying that they're being greedy, I'm just saying from a business perspective, if you knew people would spend $100 on raids if they could find them, wouldn't you want them to be able to do that? So again, in this case, gym maps are an indication of something that players want. And it's not unprecedented for Niantic to build some kind of system like this. For Ingress, there's an Intel map, which is accessible online, that shows you portals, and it shows you who currently controls the portals. So it's not too far-fetched, pardon my pun, to think that Niantic could build its own gym map eventually. I think right now things have sort of struck a balance with the third-party maps, but I would not be surprised if Niantic in the future does introduce their own map that's available online to all Pokemon Go players. So that's just my thought on the other type of maps that people are using these days. Now, the other advantage of using maps is finding rare Pokemon. And obviously Niantic is not just going to spoon feed you rare Pokemon. They wouldn't be rare if they did. Legendaries. It's from Zoe 2 Dots. I think I know what this is, and it's probably getting added to my collection. But to make rare Pokemon a little bit more accessible, there are a couple things that can be done. One, I think, would be pretty simple. Right now, our nearby system, Pokestop tracker thing, is not the best. Let's be honest. It shows you 9 nearby Pokemon at Pokestops, and sometimes you can see 50, 100 Pokestops on your map at once. Now imagine if there was something written into the nearby list code that prioritized rare Pokemon. Imagine something like a Snorlax spawns at a Pokestop at the very edge of my map. Obviously, I'm not going to see that on my nearby list. I'm going to see 9 random Pokemon that are at Pokestops closer to me. But if the list prioritized rare Pokemon, maybe it would show me that Snorlax. Any rare Pokemon that's on your map, on your visible game area at a Pokestop, would get priority to actually show up on your nearby list. It might be 500 meters away, but at least I would know it was there, and the whole point of the game is to get out and walk, right? If I know there's something rare 500 meters away, I'm gonna walk the 500 meters. From Zoe 2 Dots, by the way, Zoe did an International Dex episode a long time ago from Australia, so I'll put that like up here if you want to check it out. Hey Nick, how are you? 1 year ago, you featured my vid in your International Dex series. There it is. Your kindness formed the base of my community of good eggs. I'm forever grateful of that kindness. Hope to thank you in person soon. I hope you enjoy this pin. Zoe 2 Dots, thank you. I love it. I've seen these on Twitter. I'm going to add it to my collection right now. And you know what? Actually, we're going to be in Japan at the same time. So, yeah. I think we can meet up in person very soon. So, prioritizing rare Pokemon on the nearby list, definitely one way to make them a little bit more accessible. One other thing that could be done, and this is just me throwing out ideas, I don't know how difficult or how realistic it really is, but why not let us help each other find Pokemon in the game? This is something that sort of already happens on Discord, Facebook groups, different local Pokemon Go communities. If someone finds a rare Pokemon, they'll let each other know. It's sort of the vanilla or the legal alternative to using maps and feeds. Look at the Sylph Road's Nest Atlas, for example. Sometimes people will compare that to trackers when I talk about it, but it's completely different. It's players sharing information with players rather than bots or spoofed bot accounts sharing information with players. There's nothing illegal going on. It's like telling your friend, hey, the pike is a Zubat nest. Only instead of telling your friend, you're putting it online so that everyone can look it up and see. Whoa. Frank, thank you so much for the painting. Everyone go check him out. F Coronado Art. And Houston, Texas. Yes, I really want to come to Houston very soon. So with the mail out of the way, let me just kind of finish up these thoughts. Sharing information with other people is something that Niantic absolutely encourages. It helps build community, and it's one way that people find rare Pokemon, by letting each other know about them. Obviously, it's not as efficient as having bot accounts out there scanning every square inch of a city, but it is one way to do it. Unfortunately, it all happens outside of the game, so anyone who's not a member of a Discord community, a Facebook group, they're not going to benefit from other people finding Pokemon. So if Niantic could give us a way to let each other know in-game, that would be one way we could help each other find rare Pokemon. Again, I don't have the specifics of how something like this would work out. This is just my suggestion. It's pretty much up to Niantic to figure out the best way to implement something like this. But imagine you could send out some kind of beacon, a way to notify players in the area that there's a rare Pokemon nearby. Let's say you find something rare, like a perfect IV Lapras. Actually, its IVs wouldn't matter, because in this hypothetical scenario, we have a way to increase a Pokemon's IVs through training or through items. So if this beacon system exists in that same ideal universe, where the IV training system also exists, let's say you find a rare Pokemon, a Lapras, and you want to let other players know where it is. You could send up a beacon. You could have a firework that shoots up, and anyone in game could see that and know that there's a rare Pokemon there. It could even include what Pokemon it is, so they would know if they actually want to go there or not. I mean, it doesn't have to be a beacon, a firework. It could be like a radio network, a way to send a notification to nearby players if there's a Pokemon that they want. And maybe through your radio, you could actually specify a list of Pokemon that you want to get notifications for. That would prevent players from spamming beacons or radio calls because they found a Zubat or a Pidgey. If you only had notifications on for things you wanted, things like Dragonite, Tyranitar, region exclusives when you're traveling, whatever it is, you would only see notifications when someone finds that Pokemon and chooses to send out a signal, a call, whatever it ends up being. So that system could appear in the encounter screen. You find the rare Pokemon, there's a button up top that says send out a call, and that would let players know within a certain radius, if they have their notifications turned on, that you found that Pokemon and that they can come get it in that area. Obviously, it doesn't have to say exactly where it is. It could just kind of point to an area so that you can go there and look for the Pokemon. But this way, the game would allow us to help each other find these rare Pokemon in-game without having to use a third-party tool like Discord or a Facebook group. You could even go so far as to have push notifications for the system enabled so that you don't actually have to be in-game to get the notification. The same way you get a slow notification when your Pokemon needs a berry, you could get a push notification that says one of your desired Pokemon has been spotted in the area. Which, just as an aside, is a good way to get people to open up the game even when they're not actively thinking about it, right? That's always a good thing for player engagement. So I guess what I'm saying is, while scanners and maps and feeds aren't providing a game-breaking advantage right now, there will come a time where the disparity between players who do use them and don't use them will be much more pronounced. By building systems into the game that negate the advantages that scanners provide, you can create a much more balanced atmosphere for any future competitive aspects to Pokemon Go. In my opinion, as a game designer, you have to look at popular third-party tools not as a threat, but as an indication of what your player base wants in the game. Obviously, you can go after the tools and try to get them shut down, but as we've seen in the past, they'll just keep coming back. And personally, I think the resources, the time and energy spent trying to get these things shut down could be much better used improving the game, building new systems for all players to enjoy that also negate the advantages provided by the third-party tools. So there are my thoughts on the topic, and hopefully this is the last time we'll ever have to talk about it. See you guys tomorrow.